Hey everybody, this is Jim Cobb from SurvivalWeekly.com. We're going to do a review today of Bushcraft First Aid by Dave Canterbury and Jason Hunt, PhD. There are currently 3 other books in the Bushcraft series: Bushcraft 101, Advanced Bushcraft, and Bushcraft Field Guide to Trapping, Gathering, and Cooking in the Wild. All 3 of those other books are by Dave Canterbury. This is the first one in the series that I'm aware of that he has an actual co-author. I know Dave and I know Jason. I know them personally. I've not trained with them, but I have gotten to know them fairly well over the years. We've corresponded online. We've met in person at one or another functions. Dave Canterbury is obviously very well known. He's got his Pathfinder school, YouTube videos, many TV appearances, all kinds of stuff going on. Jason, for those who don't know him, he's the owner and lead instructor of a school called Campcraft Outdoors in Kentucky. He's also the operations manager and an instructor at the Pathfinder school in Ohio that's co-owned by Dave. Jason is also a volunteer firefighter and EMT and is a certified wilderness emergency care instructor. His doctorate, the PhD, is in outdoor Christian leadership. Both authors come by their knowledge honestly, having earned it from years and years of practical experience. They've been there, done that. As the saying goes, both would do to ride the river with. In Bushcraft First Aid, they share their collective knowledge on what to do if things go awry when you're out in the field. My overall opinion, it's a great book. I recommend it. We're going to go through chapter by chapter and hit some of the highlights. Something the author stressed, and I also want to mention, is that this guide is absolutely no replacement for competent emergency medical care. This book will not teach you how to perform delicate surgery with your knife and a couple of pine needles. The idea here is to be able to stabilize the patient or get them to the point where you can travel to obtain competent medical treatment. You're just stabilizing somebody. It's not bushcraft doctoring, it's bushcraft first aid. Chapter 1 is Know Before You Go. Basically, the book starts off with information about protecting yourself by insulating yourself from the patient, using gloves, goggles, things like that, how to work as a team, and how to handle injuries if you're alone and you're providing your own first aid. Perhaps the best information in the chapter, though, is on how to handle stress. This is critical in a crisis, and keeping a cool head will go a long way toward improving your overall situation. You need to keep calm. If you're calm, that will help other people de-stress a little bit. Second chapter is on survival skills. Much of the information in this chapter has been covered in previous books, both in this series and elsewhere, but it's a great reminder. It's reinforcement. We cover in this chapter, we see talk about the 10 C's, which are the 10 critical items for a survival kit. The first 5, the most important: cutting tool, such as a knife; combustion device, like a ferro rod, cigarette lighter, magnifying glass; a container, stainless steel bottle or canteen; cordage, bank line or paracord; cover, an emergency survival blanket, or a 55-gallon drum liner or garbage bag. Also covered in here are the 5-minute fire, the 5-minute water boil, 5-minute shelter, things like that. These are all just basic survival skills. This chapter, again, this information you can find it elsewhere, but it's good to have it here. It reinforces it again and again and again. Chapter 3 is the emergency scene. This is, you're walking up to the injured party. What do you see? What do you do about it? Basically, the idea here is to teach you what to look for, how to evaluate the patient, how to examine the patient, watch for threats to yourself. For example, you walk up on somebody, they're lying down, face down on the ground. As you approach, you notice there are hornets everywhere. Well, rather than try to examine that patient right then and there, your first step should be to try to remove the patient to another location where it's safer for both of you. There's also discussion on how to move the patient, when to move the patient, when you shouldn't move the patient, and if you're going to, how to do it safely. Chapter 4 gets into treatment for bleeding and wounds. This is something that, everybody's going to have to deal with at one point or another. A cut, a scrape, something along those lines. You need to know how to stop the bleeding properly, when you might want to let the wound bleed a little bit. We also, in this chapter, we talk a little bit about gunshot wounds, as well as knife and axe accidents, how to handle those types of injuries. Chapter 5 is blisters and burns. You spend much time out in the field, hiking, camping, you're going to end up with blisters. You're probably going to end up with a burn at some point or another. You need to know how to treat those injuries properly. A really good section here on foot rot, or also known as trench foot, which, we don't think about it that much nowadays, but it happens. If your feet get damp and they stay damp and you can't keep them dry, they're going to end up getting severely injured. And in here we talk about, how to avoid that and what to do if it happens. Chapter 6 is on bone and joint injuries such as fractures, sprains, strains, dislocations. Going through some of the other chapters, Chapter 7 is on circulatory issues. Chapter 8 is on breathing issues like cold, flu, chest injuries, asthma. Chapter 9 is on neurological issues, stroke, seizure, headaches. Chapter 10, abdominal issues, injuries, vomiting, nausea, stomach upset. And the list, honestly, it just keeps going on and on. Chapter 11, urinary and reproductive issues. Chapter 12, acute and chronic illnesses. Chapter 13, environmental hazards. Chapter 14, insect and animal bites. Chapter 15, poisonous plants. Chapter 16 is my favorite chapter. It's on plant medicine. I think it's a highlight in this book. Our natural world is filled with plants that will help us through all sorts of medical issues. We just need to be able to recognize them for what they are and know how to use them properly. And in this section, they list just a ton of very common plants, what they're good for, how to use them. It's divided by conditions, and by conditions we're talking wind, we're talking hot, we're talking cold. So for example, plants for wind conditions. One of the first ones listed here is black willow. Medicinal actions: it's an analgesic, anti-inflammatory, appetite depressant, astringent. Uses: willow bark acts a lot like aspirin, so it is used for pain including headache, muscle pain, and menstrual cramps. Willow bark is also used for fever, the common cold, flu, and weight loss. It tells you what it tastes like, where it's generally found, areas found, generally a water indicator tree and found in moist soil areas and water holding depressions. And then there's also a description. Okay? Here's what's really cool though. In the center of the book, they've got 8 pages of full color photos of all these different plants to help you recognize them. Now, that said, these are illustrations that are only going to tell you what it looks like at one stage of its development. Plants change their appearance as they grow. Your best bet is to find a master gardener or find a local wild edibles, wild medicinal expert who is willing to teach you, take you outside and show you physically in front of you, this is what that plant is, this is what it looks like at this stage, at this stage, at this stage, so you can recognize it no matter where you are, no matter what the season is. This is a great start, but don't let this be the end for you. This should be the beginning. Outside of that center spread, there are no photos in the book. There are several illustrations. They're line drawings. And honestly, I like the line drawings. They're clear. They make it easy to see. They're a great actual illustration of what the point that they're trying to make, or the technique, or the tool that they're trying to show you. Sometimes I think line drawings it's easier to see than with a photograph. As I said at the outset, it's a great book. I do recommend it. Bear in mind that this is for medical treatment in austere conditions, out in the field with minimal supplies. The focus is on stabilizing the patient until they can be treated by a medical professional. This book should not be seen as an end-all be-all to medical knowledge. It's a start. It is a great addition to the preparedness library, but it shouldn't be your only medical text. Bushcraft First Aid is available at all bookstores. I'll leave a link to it on Amazon down below the video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.